Hey everyone, Dan here with HardlyBrief Tutorials. This is part 2 of the Rigidbody movement tutorial, and in this video we're going to extend the movement controller we created last time and add a couple different moves to it and show how easy it is to customize and extend it for your purposes. I'll also show you how to use the controller with the new Unity input system. I do have a full video on that, which I'll link now in the card on the YouTube video. That covers exactly how to set up the new input system as well as getting it running in your projects. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It does help out the channel a lot. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them down below. But let's go ahead and get started. First, we're going to set the project up, get the input system running, and then we're going to jump into the code, and I'm going to walk you through each of the steps on how to customize the controller. One more thing, I set up a new Discord server for the community. I created 2 major sections on the server. One is for HardlyBrief Tutorials, where you can ask me questions, you can ask other people questions, get some help on whatever you're working on. You can chat with other game developers, and you can even suggest tutorial ideas. So if there's something that you want me to work on, something you want me to show you how to do, add it there and we can start working on it. Also, I added a channel where I'm going to be posting the scripts from the videos that I create on the channel. So if you become a member of the Discord, you'll be able to download those scripts. The other major section is a personal devlog of mine for a tennis game I've been working on, so be sure to check that out, follow along. I do post frequent updates on that, and I take suggestions as well. I have also created a Trello board for everyone to follow along to check out and see when videos are going to be uploaded to YouTube. You can see what I'm working on, you can see what's going to be released next, and then all the suggestions I get from the Discord or from Twitter or from the YouTube comments, I'm going to put in the backlog on that Trello board. And then maybe we could do some voting or something to show you, to figure out what exactly everyone wants me to work on and show you how to do. So if that all sounds interesting, again, please join us. So I'm in the same project as last time where we left off. The only thing that I've done is I've removed the 2 scripts, the movement controller and the basic movement controls components that we added. I have removed those from our player. And the first thing that we want to do in this project to get it going is we want to add the Unity input system. So the way I'm going to do that is go to Window. I'm going to go to the Package Manager. And in the Package Manager at the top left, you want to make sure that you're in Unity Registry so you can see all the Unity assets that are available. And then you're going to go down to Input System, and you'll see this window. The bottom right, yours will say Install if you don't have it installed in your project. You're going to click Install. It's going to download some packages, install, and it's going to ask you to restart the editor. Once you restart the editor, you'll be back to this same screen. You should have your player object, and you're going to have a new asset that you'll be able to create. So in my scripts folder, down here in my project folder, I have a folder called Input System. I'm going to double click into that, and if you create one and you right click and you go to create, at the very bottom you're going to have this Input Actions asset you can create, and I've already created one, and I'll show you it. Again, I have the video that I linked earlier that you guys should check out if you've never used the new input system. But you can create an Input Actions asset. You double click it. I labeled mine Game Controls, and this is where I have all of my controls set up. So I created an action map by clicking the plus button, and I've named it Player Controls, and then I've added 5 actions. The first action I have is a move action. It's a 2D vector, and I have W, A, S, and D. To add a 2D vector, you can actually right click on the action and say Add 2D Vector Composite. That will allow you to add the WASD keys. It will just automatically add this 2D vector for you. And then these are the bindings. So the way to add the up button, path would be empty. I click Listen, hit W on my keyboard, and there we go. I've gone ahead and added Jump. It's an action type button. I've put it to spacebar. I have left shift tied to sprint. Slam is tied to the Q button on my keyboard, and dash is tied to my left control on the keyboard. Again, if this is confusing to you, please check out that other video. I do have autosave on, and then in the inspector here you can see I'm generating a C# class, which generates this game control C# class that's needed to actually use the input system. So once you have that all set up, then we're going to go ahead and get into the scripts. There's going to be 2 scripts that you need to create this time. It's going to be advanced movement controller, and then advanced movement controls. The first script we're going to take a look at is the control script, so we can actually tie in the Unity input system, and then we're going to move into extending the actual movement controller. So let's go ahead and jump into the code to check out the advanced movement controls class. I'm in the advanced movement controls class, and basically this class is going to extend the movement controls class that we created last time, or that I discussed last time. So let me jump back to that just so you know. We created an abstract class called movement controls, and with that we defined a class called basic movement controls that actually implements and defines how the controls should function. And once we made that, we added that component, the basic movement controls component, to our game object. So in this video, we want to kind of add more to that behavior. So we're going to make another implementation of the movement controls class, and I've gone ahead and called it advanced movement controls. I'm going to walk through each line of this, and then hopefully you guys understand it. If you have any questions, again, leave them down in the comments below. But the first thing I have are two public events, and these are looking for when the slam button is pressed and when the dash button is pressed. And these fire when we perform those actions. I've created a private variable called game controls, which references the auto-generated game control script that the new Unity input system creates. So the first thing I do is on the awake method. So once this game object turns on, we're going to go ahead and get a reference to the game controls. We're going to create a new game controls object and cache it in the game controls variable. On the initialize, which is an override. So again, if I go back to the original movement controls, there is a public abstract method called initialize, meaning we need to create or write the implementation in our movement controls, which I do here. So I do a public override, initialize, and I call a private method called subscribe. And this is where we're going to call it subscribing, but where we're going to tie into our Unity input system, which I do in these few lines of code here. So what we do is I say game controls dot player controls. Player controls is the action map that I created. I'm going to call the action move, and then I'm looking for when it's been performed and when it's been canceled. And then you do the plus equals context and then lambda, and I'm saying this move direction, which move direction is the vector2 variable that is in the movement controls class, right? So I'm just referencing that. I'm saying set that equal to the vector2 value that's coming from the keyboard when it's being performed, and when it's canceled, I'm just saying, hey, set it equal to 0. Set it to equal to vector2.0. And just so this is clear, let me jump back into Unity so you can actually see. So if I go into the input system and the controls, again, we're referencing player controls action map and then the move action, and we're reading this vector2 that's based on the WASD keys. Okay, so back into the code, we need to tie up our sprint. So on sprint, we're on the perform sprint and canceled. We're calling the on start sprint and on stop sprint, which again, those are methods, virtual methods that are in the movement controls abstract class, right? We have on start sprint and on stop sprint, and those just invoke the different events that are fired in that class, or that can be fired in that class, excuse me. We tie in jumping. So if jump.performed, then we're going to call the onJump method. And then we do a very similar thing here, where basically if we press the slam button or if we press the dash button, then we're going to go ahead and invoke the events that we created up at the top, assuming, again, this is what this question mark is, assuming that they're not null, meaning that this event actually has a listener. Then we'll go ahead and invoke it and start it. Two things that are really important to make sure that that the Unity system works is you need to make sure that you enable the controls. So I do that in on enable. So this is the mono behavior on enable and a mono behavior on disable. I make sure that the game controls are enabled when this game object is enabled. Otherwise, none of this will work. So take a moment, write that down. Again, if you have any questions, leave it in the comments below. Now that we have the advanced movement controls, we're actually going to go to our advanced movement. Now I'm in the advanced movement controller class. This is something you have to create. So it's a brand new script, and it's going to inherit the movement controller, which again is what we created last time, right? So at its core, it's going to inherit all this functionality that we wrote. It's going to be able to jump. It's going to be able to sprint. It's going to be able to check if it's grounded. and we'll be able to adjust all those settings within the advanced movement controller, plus whatever features we add on. So the first thing that we wanted to add was is slamming. So at the top, I have two public properties called is slamming and is dashing. This is not mandatory, but this is something that just exposes kind of what the movement controller is doing and exposes its state that you can use in other classes or for UI elements, whatever you want. And then moving down this class, we have a header for slamming. This just is for the inspector. We're showing this slam down force. So this is the force that's going to be applied to our rigid body to move it down in the downward direction. It's a serialized field just so that we can expose it to the editor. We have a private bool value called is slamming that's just used within the script if we need it. And then we move to dashing. So we want to be able to get our character to dash while we're moving in a certain direction by pressing the left control key, meaning we're going to apply a little bit extra force in whatever direction they're moving to get them to move a little quicker. So here we have a dash force. Again, it's serialized to expose it to the editor. And then we have a private bool value, just is dashing, to use within the class itself. So the first thing that we do is we override the first initialize. So if I go back to our movement controller, scroll down, we have a protected virtual void first initialize, meaning I can override it and add more functionality to it. And I can use the existing functionality to it and just add a couple lines, which is what I do in the advanced movement controller. So one thing I know for a fact is that I need this controller to check to see if it's grounded. I added that to my dash, or to my slam, excuse me. It says I'm checking to see if I'm grounded or not in my slam ability, and I want to make sure that this thing then requires that should check ground is true. So I do that in my first initialize. So I say protected override. So I'm going to override the base class first initialize method. I'm going to make sure that should check is true, meaning if you accidentally check this off in the editor, this is just going to say nope, it should be checked true. And then I'm going to run all the base class first initialize. So I'm just doing one extra thing, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to run the rest of this code and make sure that, hey, do I have that ground check transform and all that information, so we don't lose out on it. And that's what this method does. Then I have my on enable and on disable. These are the methods that model behavior provides us. And I'm saying when I turn this game object on, I want to subscribe to some things. And when I turn this game object off, I need to make sure that I unsubscribe from those things. So let's go actually check those out real quick. So in my subscribe method, it's private. So it's just for this advanced movement controller. And the first thing that we want to do is access the control script. So if you remember, we actually have a movement controls serialized field in the base movement controls class up here. And it just it's just the type of movement controls, which just has these few things. But we want to get access to the slam button pressed and the dash button pressed. So what we need to do is use polymorphism not polymorphism. We want to cast this movement controls back to advanced movement controls. So I'm creating a local variable called controls. It's of type advanced movement controls, and I cast the movement controls to that, and that exposes the slam button press and the dash button press events, and then I can go ahead and add a listener to those events. So here I have controls.slam button pressed. I'm adding the on slam button pressed a listener or a method to the event, and this is what it looks like. So the private void on slam button press, it checks to see, hey, are we grounded or not? If we're not grounded, so if grounded is false, then we're going to set slamming to true, and then we're going to add a force to our rigid body. So rigidbody.add force, and we're going to add a new vector 3 force of 0 in the x, a negative version of our slam down force because we want to go downward, we don't want to go up, and then 0 in the y, and this is force mode impulse. So this is literally like a jump. It's the opposite of jump, right? Instead of going up, we're going to be pushing ourselves down. So that's the slam down force. The other one here is on dash button pressed. And this method is pretty simple as well. We have, right when we get into it, we're going to say, hey, is dashing is true. We're going to add a force to it. In this case, we're going to take the move direction that we're currently moving in. So move direction.x. 0 out the y because we're not going to be moving vertically. we want to get the z axis, so we do move direction.y on our z axis, and then we're going to multiply this vector 3 by our dash force. So our dash force is the amount of force we apply when we want to move our character in a certain direction. That gets multiplied basically by the direction of our character movement. And again, that's force mode impulse. Once we add this force, our dash is complete, and we're going to set dashing to false. So those are the two. That's actually like the core functionality, the features that we added to the advanced movement controller. So these two methods allow us to do two extra things. And then unsubscribe is basically doing the same thing as subscribe does. Caches the advanced controls, and then we just do minus equals, so we take away the method from the event. Now, I do have one other thing in here. I have a fixed update. I have a protected override fixed update, and this just checks if slamming is true and now we're grounded, we're going to make sure we set slamming back to false. And that's just a check to make sure that we're not constantly in a slamming state. We need to be able to reset that state, and that's what I do here. And actually, I'm going to move this one down one line. But yeah, so that's pretty much it. That's our movement controller. So now that we have both our advanced movement controller and our advanced movement controls, we can go ahead and add those components to our rigid body in Unity, and that's what we're going to do next. I'm back in Unity, and I'm on my player, and what we're going to do is add these components. So the first thing I want to do is add my advanced movement controller. So here I just type in advanced, add component, typed in advanced, and now I have it. And you can see I have, again, the movement controls, the requirement for the movement controls component. I have the base movement, I have ground check, sprinting, jumping, and then now we have the new slamming and dashing. These are the two features that we added to this more advanced controller. But first we need to satisfy this movement controls. So let's go ahead and add our advanced movement controls. So I'm going to go down to add component, and I'm going to add advanced movement controls. And you see here we have the same public vector move direction, so we can see which direction we're moving. But I'm now going to drag this component to my movement controls serialized field, which satisfies that requirement. We know should check ground is true, so we need to add our ground check transform, which I do here. And I'm going to change my ground layer mask tag to true, or excuse me, to ground. And that should be it. That should be all we need to get going. So I'm going to press play, and we should be able to move our character around, which we can. If I hit Q, I can slam. And if I hit left control, I can dash, which it's kind of hard to see, but they get a little bit movement. So there we go. Pretty simple, pretty quick. You can really extend this to add whatever features you want, kind of whatever your heart desires, whatever you can think of. It should be pretty extendable. And what's really cool is, let's say you like this advanced movement controller. This can become a new base class, and you can even extend this one further if you want. A couple things I wanted to show off before I end the video, though, is first off, if you want to add a trail, I have a trail renderer that I added to the character. That's what that green trail was. And I literally just created a new game object, empty game object, moved it down, and added the trail renderer component and changed its color to this this gradient. So that's it, just to add a little bit more flair to the character. Another thing I wanted to go over that I forgot to go over in the last video is I added a HUD script. So I'm going to click it here. You see advanced movement HUD. And what this does, it uses the old OnGUI system just to show me some statistics, some data about my movement controller. And the way that works, I'm going to open that up now. I'm going to open both of them. Let me go back. That's not what I wanted. Here. Okay. So what I did in the first video, which I forgot to show, was I had a movement controller HUD, as I called it. And this requires a type of movement controller component. And at the wake method, I go ahead and get the movement controller component that I know is attached to this controller, or this game object, excuse me. And then I use this onGUI method that I've labeled protected and virtual, and I just output a few things. So I say movement controller info, current speed, which I just round because I don't need to see all the decimal values of my current speed. I just want to know, like 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever. Are we grounded? Are we sprinted? And if you're not familiar with this notation, if you do a money symbol and then quotes, you can actually use brackets within your string and output actual code. So this is the base class of that, but I wanted to extend it to get me the slamming and dashing information. So I created another class called Advanced Movement HUD that inherits the movement controller HUD. And it again, I just override the onGUI method. I call the base onGUI because I want all the basic stuff here. I want the current speed, the grounded, the sprinting. And then I just added is slamming and is dashing and just kind of moved it down respectively. So now when I press play, again with the HUD attached to the player, Advanced Movement HUD, you can see I have the controller info, my current speed, if I'm grounded, true or false, if I'm sprinting, true or false, and slamming. All that works. And what that does is that ties into those public properties that we set, right? So let's go back to the code real fast. In my movement controller, I have is slamming, is dashing, and in my advanced movement HUD is actually where I call that is slamming, is dashing, right? I'm accessing those public properties just to show on the screen what I'm doing. So hopefully all that makes sense. Please leave a comment, questions down below if you have any questions. Check out the Discord channel if you need more help. I'm going to post all these scripts in the Discord channel or on the Discord in a scripts channel. So if you want to download all this information, go ahead, become a member there, and then you'll be able to have all that for you to download and use for your own projects. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a good day. Please like and subscribe, and I'll talk to everybody later.